Paul, before you go any further, I think you neglected to give us a little bit of background information on the lowers.
Good comment, Mindy. Thanks a lot. Well, the lowers are people in society who feel that they're in a lose-lose situation. The game no longer includes their ability to succeed. They're in a lose-lose corner. Um, they're the minorities. They're the underclass. They're the Palestinians. They're the blacks during apartheid. It's a group that kind of has lost all hope. Now, let me continue with how Arioshari housed his participants. Keep in mind that all these people who are coming to these workshops are middle managers. So none of them are lowers. Actually, none of them are really uppers. So he would house the people who he thought would be playing uppers. Now, this would be a very few of the people in his workshops. He would house them in a very fine suite in a local hotel, maybe a penthouse. And all during his workshop, they would be fed, um, from the menu, room service, but they were allowed to order really nice things like caviar and steaks and
Drink
champagne.
champagne.
Yeah, anything they'd want, they were allowed to have. The middles would be housed as a normal, as you would expect if you go to a business meeting. Just a normal hotel in a pretty nice hotel, and you'd have normal things to eat that a person who was attending a workshop would have. The
Hmm.
lowers, which is the bulk of the population in workshops, would be housed in a barrack-like setting.
Oh no.
Yeah, and they would be fed mostly foods that would be characteristic of lowers in society. They would have beans and rice most of the time, maybe a tad of chicken once in a while, uh, but certainly it wouldn't be luxury accommodations.
Okay.
And all during the workshops, he would have them stay in these roles. And it didn't take very long until a natural human tendency occurs. They, they live into those roles. They all of a sudden, the uppers begin acting like uppers. They begin taking privileges and ordering people around. The lowers would start doing desperate acts to try to make their way and to try to make their voices heard. Um, and so this is what he would do during his whole workshop. And of course, they would do exercises, so they had to interact with one another, and they at the end of the workshop, they'd be able to see where the uppers were coming from a little bit, lowers were coming from, and they'd realize how to enhance their middle position a little bit.
Hmm. Maybe you should tell the story of the workshop that you did in Nebraska that you told me about, because that was a really great example of what happened.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I was just thinking of doing that.
Oh, good.
To show this dichotomy or trichotomy, I don't know what you call it, uh, that naturally occurs with people, I discovered a game called Star Power. Now, this is a simple game, and you play it with colored discs, and it's very quick, simple game to explain. And at workshops, when I would be wanting to focus on this difference, I would have them play the Star Power game. And during the Star Power game, I would walk around and I would have them draw these little chips from bags. And the chips were different colors, and each color had a different weight, a different number to it. For example, the gold chips were 5 points, the blue chips were 4 points, the red chips were three, and so on. And I would have them pick out of these bags. Now, in order to maneuver some people into the uppers and some people into the lowers, I would enrich certain bags and deplete certain bags that they would pick from. Now, they were never aware of the fact that I was switching bags all the time, but I'm a pretty slick character, and I was able to get away with it every time I would do this. So after about an hour and a half of playing Star Power, I would start eliciting these tendencies of the uppers, lowers, and middles out of these groups that had just come in. They were all middle managers to a workshop. The bulk of them would be in the lower group. Some of them would be in the middle group, and a very few I would isolate into the higher group. Now, after the game's played for a while, the upper group starts thinking that they deserve to be in the upper group because they were so skillful at playing the game, which is totally absurd because, of course, I was enriching the bag they were picking from. But nevertheless, they had this notion. The middles had no idea what to do, and the lowers would get desperate. There was nothing they could do to increase their points, and they'd ruminate in the corner of the room. This big bulk of lowers would ruminate in the corner of the room, figuring out what to do. Before we play the game, just to keep people's interests, I would have them all contribute $1, and we would put this in the pot so that they would have some incentive, because I would say, well, the winners of the game, I'll divide this pot amongst the winners of the game. But when one game I started, the lowers, shortly after we stopped playing, stole the money. They were in a lose-lose situation. They couldn't win, and so
yeah, what are they going to do?
What could they do? The key to this story, and the most dramatic thing that ever happened when I was doing this, was with a woman from Nebraska, who was from a big company in Nebraska, a division of a company in Nebraska. And she had come to a 2-week workshop where we were working on team building and how to understand people. And after the first week of this workshop, this is the type of person she was. She was so sweet, a lovely person. I worked with her for many years after this. Here's the type of person she was. Where I was doing these workshops, they had a facility that included like little mailboxes for each person. So if they got a phone call during the meeting, somebody from our staff would put a note in their little box, and they could communicate back and forth. You want to go to lunch, da 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 da. And so after the first week, this woman was so sweet that she went out and bought a card. There were probably 25 people in this class. She bought a card for each one and signed it and had a little note in there saying, "It was so wonderful participating with you in this last week. I was really looking forward next week getting back into it with you." So next week comes, and the first thing on my schedule is the Star Power game to teach them about uppers, middles, and lowers. So we get started, and it just so happened, actually I wasn't aiming for this at all, it just so happened that Miss Nebraska surfaces into the uppers. Her and 2 men end up being the ones that are occupying the space of the uppers. Just for your edification, let me tell you how they act during this workshop. The uppers are very cliquey. They talk to one another almost in whispers. The middles sit there with their mouths open, really don't know what to do. And the lowers are ruminating and grumbling over in the corner, wondering, how long is this going to last? How long do we have to suffer through being a lower? So anyway, at one point in the game, toward the end of the game, I say, well, the trends are just continuing and continuing. The uppers seem to be winning and winning, and the lowers don't seem to have a chance. Let's entertain modifications to the game maybe to give people more of a chance. And here's how it has to go. If the middles make a suggestion, they can just give it to the uppers. If the lowers make a suggestion, it has to go through the middles, just like in a corporation, and on to the uppers for their approval. So what happens during this stage is, of course, the The uppers are totally happy with what's going on. They're content. The middles don't say boo because they're scared of slipping into the lower. They want to please the upper. They're sitting there. But the lowers immediately start writing things on papers. Immediately they have ideas. And they write them on these little notepads. And of course, they all approve of one. The lowers all approve of one. And it's, of course, handed to the middles. Middles have no idea how to deal with this. So they pass it on to the upper. Well, the upper that gets it is Miss Nebraska. She's in this group with two middle management men. And her actions at this point are so dramatic that if you didn't think the star power game worked before, this certainly would put your mind at ease. Here's what she did. She took the small piece of paper from the middles, she read it, she wrinkled it up, and with an incredibly villainous laugh, she goes, "Ha ha ha! Fat chance."
Sounds like quite a change of character from the woman who put notes in everybody's mailbox the day before.
She transformed. She immediately got into the role of the uppers, just as the thieving little lowers got into the role of the lower.
Well, do you think she was just doing that to play the game right, or did it actually seem to really transform her character?
I watched her do this. I was blown away by it myself.
Mm-hmm.
If she was putting it on, she's the best actress in the world. Um, I mean, this whole demeanor went away the minute we stopped the game and they got back into another exercise. But it was really interesting how they fall right into the roles. It must be a natural occurring inside the human spirit, where if you're treated a certain way, you start to act a certain way, and you adopt the beliefs and the values of whatever category you're in.
I guess it would be pretty easy too if you make it into the uppers to adapt that stance.
Yeah, people like to be pampered and treated well and felt like they deserve more than others.
Okay, so how does this story, how does this relate to what you see happening in the world today or what you think is about to unfold in what's coming?
Well, what's going on in the planet today, as far as I can see, there certainly is uppers. There certainly are um, elites that dominate uh, and control and feel like they deserve more. As a matter of fact, they're creating this breakaway society and leaving the rest of us behind. That's how ensconced in this role that group is.
Hmm.
But I see the bulk of the population in the role as middles.
Hmm.
They want to please the uppers. A lot of them are minions. A lot of them work for governments. They want to please the uppers. So God, do not let me fall into the category of the lowers. And I believe as long as the bulk of the population sees themselves as middles, we're dead in the water. Because they can say, well, yeah, I'm trying to do what I can. I have a good job as a TSA agent, and I'm doing what I can. I'm serving the elite masters, if they know that they're serving the elite
They
masters.
probably don't.
They probably don't. But they're certainly not in a position to do anything. The position for action in this whole scenario is the lowers.
Well, we're probably all about to become lowers since they're doing everything they can to destroy the middle class.
Well, I think that's true. I think what's happening is they're slowly lowering us all into the lowers, like the boiling frog thing. Slowly, slowly, slowly. And then when we wake up one morning, we're all going to be lowers. The truth is, right now, we're all lowers.